couple sessions I do on reporting services. And they picked my 100 level, my introductory beginner level one, for whatever reasons. And I was surprised because I haven't done this one in a while. My other ones are more popular. So I'd like to get a little idea of those of you here who have no exposure to SSRS. Because, oh, wow, good, some. So you're here to get some exposure. All right, then those of you who are here, who are using it actively, very familiar with it, but are still here? A few? Okay, you'll pick up some stuff. I'll try and find something. So the reason I ask is, while I'm going to do what the organizers picked on my introductory one, I did go in and add some slides from one of my other presentations that has some stuff from 2016. And time permitting, because I like to go fast. We could even jump into one of my other presentations, or I could fire it up if there's some Q&A over some specific items and topics on that. That said, so we still have another minute or two. I'll let people come in from the last session. Anyone have something in particular they want to see today that they want to get out of this session that I can make a point of covering? Really? I get the post-lunch food coma crowd. I think there was caffeine out there. There's still time. I don't think that option is there. Collapse is on columns. So I'll level with you. I don't get to use reporting services much anymore. We're using a proprietary BI platform, and I'm not really advancing new stuff anymore. I'm maintaining the old. I had a report developer that I trained that worked for me that we laid off because we're moving away from it. Not my call. I fully believe in the product. That's why I like teaching these and presenting these, because it isn't going anywhere. My boss seems to think it is. I will prove him wrong in time because it is going around. The paginated report, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So I said I want to go fast because I go to a lot of SQL Saturdays, and if I'm not presenting, I'm in the audience learning. And I like the fire hose approach. I like pour it on. Give it to me. I'll take what I can. I'll go back to work and use what I can. But that doesn't fit everyone. So if I am going too fast, stop me, grab me, ask me a question. If I think it's coming up, I will say, hey, I'm going to get to that. If I lied and I don't, call me out on it. This isn't about me up here talking. It's for you guys to learn, so don't hesitate. Let's make it interactive and stay lively. There's a couple more sessions after this before the after event. So we'll find the energy. I'll try and inject some. I'm going to get started. Let's see, is this working? Yeah, this is me. You can track me down on these various medias. But it's not about me, it's about reporting services. And who here is, this is their first SQL Saturday? Fantastic. Wait, hold them up, Steve, that's a majority. Excellent. Come find me later because I don't want to take up the time now, but I'd like to learn about how you heard about it. And who here has been to Summit, SQL Summit? All right, who's heard of SQL Summit? All right, well, the speakers prior to me likely mentioned it. It is a week of SQL Saturday in Seattle, Washington. In the last week of October, the first week of November this year. Traditionally, the last week of October. It is the same presenters that you see here. You are getting a one-day mini SQL Summit for free, thanks to these people. And the speakers who flew from all over the country, including all over the world. I went to a presentation this morning, someone from South Africa. They flew here on their dime to make it possible. So support our sponsors, visit them. They make this possible. SQL Summit will cost you a couple grand plus travel to go. Go. Ask your boss to go. If they ask you, is this for you or for the company, what's the answer? Yes. That is the answer. Yes. It is a fantastic event. Days and days of this training and more, and networking, and all kinds of great fun. And join your user group. Who's active in their local user group? Look into your local user group. We meet on the second Thursday of every month in Lake Forest, California. One of the presenters who I think is on this stage after me presented at our user group just last Thursday night. They're great events to learn more, advance your training, and network with other peers. These are some of the ones in the area. There is another SQL Saturday coming up in September in San Diego. Don't miss it. It's not far. And then Orange County SQL Saturday is in the spring. It was April 1 this year. I think it's going to be April 8 next year. Those are the ones you can get to easily. Please fill out the evaluations. They're online. I used to pass out some paper, and then I adopted the technology available to us. I think there's a link in your program guide. You can go to the website and fill out the evaluations. There's session evaluations as well as event evaluations. And I organize the SQL Saturday Orange County event, and I really use those evaluations. The good, the bad, the ugly. I want to hear it, whether it's for the session or the event. We use that. We learn from our mistakes in our daily jobs along with these events, all put on by the volunteers in the community to make it happen. So the feedback is good, all of it. So please fill out your evals. They're doing a really neat idea here at this Saturday. I have these boxes that are keeping me within view of the camera. One has a box of like cards, some green thumbs up, and one is a box of didn't like green cards, and then I have an envelope. So please pick a card, put it in the envelope, and I'll take a glance at them and throw out all the red ones, and then I'll give them to the organizers for that. So again, this presentation I haven't done in a while. I love reporting services and really think it's not going anywhere. At SQL Summit, the event I mentioned, Microsoft made very clear their strategy. With 2016, SQL reporting services finally got some love. We got some new features. They fixed a few things. They refreshed the interface, which I'll show a little bit on. But most importantly to me, my takeaway was that after a decade of nothing, we got some love and it's going places. And they said, yes, the paginated report, print nicely, is not going away. My accounting department will never give up their print. So Power BI, yeah, killer tool for analytics. But for reporting, SSRS is your tool, particularly when you want that paginated. And now in SSRS, we have mobile reports because more and more people are living off a 4-inch screen or a 9-inch screen instead of a 13-inch screen. And they laid out their BI strategy really, really well at Summit, and we could see where it's going. So SSRS is going to be part of it. Again, this was introductory, so I'm assuming most of you know little to nothing. It came out more than a decade ago. I adopted it when it came out and threw away Crystal Reports back in 2004. It is a separate installation, but you own it. It is part of your SQL Server licensing, so there is no cost. You will need to get it installed, and depending on your environment, your workplace, you may or may not be able to do that yourself, but there is not a cost inhibitor because it's part of SQL Server, as long as it's on the SQL Server database. If it's a brand new server, just for reporting services, different licensing story. It is available in all versions, including the now free developer edition. So you can install it on your workstation. I have it installed on my other laptop just for playing. I restored a database to it and do whatever I want on that one. The under the desk Black Ops dev box. Originally, it required IIS, and there was a lot of heat for that. It no longer requires IIS. for reporting services. But it does look just like a website. It uses web services. Looks, feels, smells, tastes like a website. You can install it in native mode or SharePoint integrated mode. Some of you said you're using it. Anyone using it in SharePoint mode? Good. Don't. Avoid it. I have both. I have a couple integrated mode installations and a native mode, and I have a whole session I do on the pros and cons on that and why. I'm not going to go into it here. Reach out to me if you have or hear of a peer who's going to be doing integrated mode, and I'll help talk you out of it. I'll help talk them out of it. And most importantly, most SharePoint installations, mine included, are going to SharePoint Online, and integrated mode is not supported. And more companies are moving everything to the cloud, so that's a big deal. All the more reason to not do it now. Report creation tool. So you do install a IDE environment for installing it. It was originally called BIDS, for Business Intelligent Design Tools. It's now SQL Server Data Tools. It is a free tool. It looks, feels like Visual Studio. It even says Visual Studio Shell at the top, but there is no cost. And again, I'm emphasizing this. I come out of the restaurant industry where we have no IT budget historically, and cost is a big deal. So there is no cost to install the design tool. There is also a report builder tool that was originally designed for the power user. You've got your accounting power user, your Excel power user. Microsoft envisioned it as a really easy tool for them to adopt some of this and build their own. With that pipe dream, everyone talks about a self-service BI. I'm a BI professional. I don't think it'll ever happen, which is good because I'm a BI professional. I don't need self-serve BI. Then they had version 2.0 of Report Builder. There might be a 3.0 because I haven't looked at it anymore. They kind of made it more and more powerful, and in my opinion, hurt themselves because that power came at complexity, and it made it a little bit more intimidating for the original intent of the power user. But that is a separate application. It's a nice little tool, really easy to bang out some stuff. You, as a database professional, still have to provide them with the data models, but they get to put the data on the page and manipulate it. Questions? So I will not be standing behind this, navigating through the tools. I've taken screenshots of the tools. These are all the actual tools so that we can see it and cover it and move quickly. This is a very old report I wrote years ago, and I grabbed it because it's one of the more complex ones, in that it has a couple data grids, another data grid, 3 different sub-reports, and a couple more data grids. And I dynamically show or display different portions of that, depending on the parameters picked. And I have some examples of what you can do and how powerful this can be and the flexibility. I know I'm hearing more and more from peers that Power BI, the company isn't going to go there because of Power BI in the cloud. They want an on-prem solution. Microsoft isn't there yet with Power BI. You can build some pretty cool dashboards in SSRS. So you go in, first thing you're going to need is a data source. You simply create a data source. Microsoft has built in a whole bunch of data sources, including a SharePoint list. Whose company phone list is an Excel spreadsheet? Oh, you're lying. There's got to be one of you. The thing that's printed on the wall of the cube when you need to call Susie in accounting. Where'd that document come from? Where? A Word doc. Even worse. Our front desk lady would go and have to move everything around every time there was some turnover or an extension changed and all of that. I turned that into a SharePoint list. And I query the SharePoint list with reporting services, and now I have a data set and I can do all kinds of stuff with. And Microsoft allows, with this built-in data source, makes that really, really easy. Really easy. So if you're trying to report on some data in SharePoint, SSRS is excellent for it. So once you get a data source, you're going to need to put it into a data set. So it has very extensive parameter collection capabilities. Again, I picked this one. I had a user that would run a report, run the same report with different parameters, maybe different selection of stores, maybe a different date range, and they'd have it on their 2 screens, and they'd look at them side by side and do some comparison. And I watched them, and I go, here, let me help you out here. I took that report, I gave it 2 sets of parameters, group 1, group 2, and then I did the delta on the report for them. So whatever, and it got me into a poor man. I did this like eight years ago, poor man's BI. They could now compare whatever different data collections they wanted, whether they were comparing one store in Phoenix to the store aggregate in Phoenix, or all of the Phoenix stores for 1 week compared to the next week or compared to the same week last year. And you can do that with the parameters. It does take up a lot of screen real estate because until 2016, we only got 2 columns for the parameters. So in the Designer, in the IDE, you can have many, many, many projects. My report implementation has over 180 reports. And in my project file, I have a whole bunch of them listed. I tend to add them and remove them to keep the list relatively low. And it makes it really easy to go work. And you can open many at a time, and they show up as tabs across the top here. And it makes it really easy to go cut and paste some code you've used in one to another one if you need to. That's something you cannot do with the report builder thing I mentioned. You can only do that in the design tool. Oh, report builder. Like I said, a simpler, less intimidating power user interface. This is a really old one. This is from, I think, version 1 of report builder. So I talked about SharePoint. So when you deploy a report right from Design Tool, you right-click Deploy, and it goes to the Report Manager website. And then your users can see it. Depending on permissions and the folder structure, that's it. You're good. If you are in SharePoint integrated mode, it deploys it to a library, a document library in SharePoint. And then the users can see it, click on it, run the report. There's lots of limitations in SharePoint, which is why I panned it there. The number one limitation, in my opinion, is that you don't get the capability of linked reports. So I have reports where if you are Region Manager 1, you only get to see Region 1. You only get to see Region 2, etc. And I default the parameter to 1 so that when you go there, it runs for your area. When you go there, it runs for your area. But the boss is constantly going, you know, make that column a little wider, change the font, change the color. I don't want to go change the 5 regions I have. So I create one report, and I make a linked report that links back to the master. I change the default parameter for the region to the different reports. Super, super powerful capability. You can do different date ranges. You can have the same report that is yesterday, week to date, period to date, year to date, last year. And if you go in and make a change to add a column, fix a broken formula, boom, they all get the update. Cannot get that in SharePoint integrated mode. Linked reports. Oh, did I move it forward? Oh, come on, speak up. How far did I go? Oh, that's cold. You can easily schedule reports to send. I discourage the practice. I really believe in come and get it. Build it and they will come has not worked out for me, but have them come to the portal. Most data is dynamic. If you email, we have one report that emails out every day, the 10 a.m. sales report. And occasionally, all the data isn't in. We're a 24-hour operation. We're loading data all day long. We don't have a maintenance window. And sometimes the 10 o'clock report is missing a whole bunch of stores. And I'm like, sorry, they didn't pull. Internet connections to hundreds of restaurants is flaky. So I discourage it. But you can schedule reports to automatically send. If you have Enterprise Edition, anyone? Enterprise Edition? Oh, come on. There's got to be someone. Wow. There's a feature called data-driven subscriptions, where you can actually write a query and only send a report if it's relevant, if there's data. Like if you had an exception-based report, these are the stores that were over in overtime, ran too much overtime yesterday. It'll only send it if there's data, because you don't want to send a report and say, hey, everyone complied with overtime rules. You can do that in Enterprise Edition only. You can snapshot reports and cache the data. If you're different than my operation where the data is loaded at night and you have yesterday's sales, you can actually schedule that report to run at 8 a.m. when you know the data load is completed. And then when your users go query it, there are no queries to the database. The data is stored in an intermediary format in the report server database so that when everyone comes in and starts running that report, there is no load on the data warehouse, only on the report server, and it just serves them the report. So it can be really fast if your query to get the data is long. Particularly important on reports that might run really long, like year-to-date or quarterly reports, quarter-to-date kind of stuff. If the data isn't changing, snapshotting is an excellent way to do that. You can also do neat things like, say, snapshot it and use this data for the next hour. And after an hour, expire that snapshot and refresh it. If you know the data changes on the hour, every hour, you can do some fancy stuff like that. All right, so I said in SharePoint, so this is a SharePoint site page, and that's what the reports look like. You get a little description, the link for the report, and a little description. This is the older version of reporting services. This is not 2016. I have some slides on that coming up. It is essentially the same physical structure, look, feel. It just gets a facelift. It's a little new modern look, and we'll see some of that. So you get to create folders, which we're all familiar with, and put your reports in. I have a hybrid folder structure of report type versus department. I have some that are just for a particular department, but then there's a sales folder that many departments are looking at. So you can do, you have your flexibility. Again, native mode is really flexible. I don't use the report manager interface at all. I actually have an intranet page. It happens to be SharePoint, but it could be any intranet page that has all the reports. And I think I have a slide on it coming up. And it allowed me the ultimate in flexibility in my presentation layer for the users to pick their reports. I'm able to group them any way I want, handle permissions, and then I have a really neat feature where you get a preview of the report, which you can't do natively. But we did it with some relatively simple custom code. One of the other complaints in SharePoint integrated mode is when you pick the report from this list, it pops up in a new window, and all the parameters are down the right, and Microsoft decided the button name apply made sense. Whereas in native mode, it's run report or view report. I don't know what apply. Apply the parameters, yeah. So more flexibility. So this is my custom portal. It happens to be SharePoint. This is just a bunch of hyperlinks. It's just a SharePoint web page of hyperlinks. And I go and paste the link from the report server website into a SharePoint list object of these hyperlinks. So then I can group it and lay it out much better than the folder structure, right? So this kind of simulates the folder, right? This is store sales, menu item sales, menu analysis. So this might be a folder in the native mode, but now I get to list them. And I like it because I can show you on one screen dozens of reports to choose from instead of having to navigate folders. I'm able to really flatten it to get a better presentation window. And that's, you can do that with any HTML, any intranet. This was version 1. the complaint we got from users was there's too many reports. I don't know which report to run. I can't find the report I want. And part of it was too many is because they asked for all those reports, and we wrote them for them. But so we came up with 2.0 here, and if you click on this little, that's a information icon, it will actually pop up with a little modal dialog box that has a little image. So I went and ran every single report, did a little screen grab, and saved a JPEG for the report. And you get it and go, oh, yeah, that's the one I want. It has the hours of the day across the top, and that's the one I want. And then they can either hit close or show report from there. That was a little bit of custom code my .NET peer wrote for a SharePoint custom web part. Again, you could do that in any intranet with some relatively simple, straightforward HTML. This is our SharePoint landing page, and this is an SSRS report embedded as a web part on the SharePoint landing page. This was really popular because we're on a profit-sharing bonus plan, and everyone wanted to see how sales was. That's old data. We're publicly traded. I wouldn't get to show you that these days. But they'd come in and they'd launch the intranet and go, oh, okay, good. We're up 6 points over last year, which is what we're after. So some examples. I had a COO, a Chief Operating Officer, one time tell me, you're dumbing down my managers. That report is just a wall of numbers, and it doesn't help me. And I'm amazed to this day how many times I'm still asked to produce another wall of numbers. As much as I want to give them some graphs and some KPIs and some analytics, they still want their wall of numbers. So there it is. And this was one of my best wall of numbers in what it produced, and it gets used the least. So I'm not real encouraged to give them more. Here is a slightly better version of the wall of numbers in that it has some drill down. If you want to see the details of this area, you simply click on that, and it'll give you this breakout for just that area. Or if you're scanning this, and again, a wall of numbers you have to scan, where it really should have some things to say, hey, this is the one that's whacked. That one should be a different color. You can drill into meat and see why meat's out 5 points on that. This is, I wanted to get away from the pick my parameters, run report, classic scenario of report writing tools we've used for decades now. And in SSRS, I wrote a report that had no parameters. When you clicked on the link on the internet, it took you here. Boom, rendered. And if you wanted to see, am I blocking some of your view? Put the short guy behind the podium. If you wanted to see the details of a region, you simply click on the region. I didn't want my users to have to go up to the parameter collection, change the region from all regions to region 2, run report. You simply click on this, and it reruns the report. You want to see, this is showing the days of the week. If you click on week, actually, I think I have a better example that walks through exactly how this dashboard works. And then I do have a session I've taught that goes to the nuts and bolts on exactly how I bolted this together. It was a long project. So I'll come back to that. Here's a combination of some graphs because we wanted to provide graphs. The operations guys in the field running the restaurants kind of wanted the at a glance, but the analysts in the finance department want their grid. So this is the same data presented in a graph and a grid to appease both audiences in one report, because I was conscious of having too many reports. So I was trying to keep the report count down. I did something, and I call the fish head Ted footer, and it is a custom footer. So all my reports have a footer with this boilerplate information of the report name, the legalese, this is proprietary, don't share it, and printed on at this date and time by that person. So that when they come to me with the 10 o'clock report, and say that this isn't right, and I see that they ran it at 6:15 a.m., I can go, come back at 10 o'clock when I've told you the data should be loaded. So if you click on this footer in my environment, it takes you to report, which gives me all kinds of details. Because when you deploy a report in SSRS, it stores that RDL, which is an XML variant, in the database, in the report server database. And you can go query that XML file and get everything that is possibly known about that. All the data sets, all the data sources, all the data sets, all the shared data sets, when it was published, when it was modified, and you can query another table view and get who has run it in the last 90 days and how many times. And I've used that extensively. A whole nother story about that. Ask me later over a cocktail. I'll tell you some good stories on how that one has worked and also hurt me. All right, so I do have demo on how this works. So if you click on Region 1, it keeps the context of the company and the region, but gives the detail of the areas inside the region. If you click on last 4 weeks, instead of it being the days of the week across the top, it shows you the weekly numbers of the 3 main KPIs that are of importance. And it kept the context of Region 1. And if you go, let's see, if you had clicked on DMA, it changes the context to the direct marketing areas for the same last 4 weeks. All completely interactive with SSRS. Under the hood, it is one RDL, one report calling itself. So you're clicking on this, and it's doing a drill through, calling itself with a different parameter collection to present it a little differently. So there's lots of slicing there. So you create a new project in the data tools. You give it a name and a location on your local machine. And then what do you do before you go home? Where do you check it into? Oh, is it that late? Come on. All right. Source control. You source control your T-SQL and your RDLs. Because when you publish it to the report server, it overwrites the one that's there. And when the user goes, no, that's not what I wanted, you got it wrong, how are you going to roll back? Source control. Management Studio doesn't have anything to do with SSRS. With your T-SQL, you'll do it in Management Studio, but you'll need Management Studio integration to a source control of your choice. And there's lots of good ones. I won't tell Steve which one I use. VSS. See, I knew you'd guess it. And we have Redgate in-house and haven't had a chance to make it happen. So you have Solution Explorer. You have your data sources. It's pretty straightforward. I need a data source. What server am I getting my data from? You have data source. You go pick the server. Here's the report server. And for a data set, I'm using this data source. And here's my data set. And you really shouldn't be doing this. You should be using this button, right? We don't want inline SQL. Call a store procedure. Avoid this bad habit. It's there intentionally. I didn't actually do this. Yeah, right. So, and one of the really nice things about data sets, you can have a shared data set. So if you have a report parameter collection that you're using over and over again, like period, all my reports have a date range, start date and end date. I made it easier on my users. Instead of having to go use a calendar control and pick a start date and an end date, I have one parameter that says, which period do you want? Do you want the week? Do you want the period? Do you want the year? So that they just pick, I'll go, I'm looking for P2, week 2. And they pick that instead of having to use a calendar control. That's a shared data set So I can use that through all of my reports. And if I make one change to that shared data set, all the reports change. The best one to use it on is your logo. If your report has a logo in the top corner, make that a call to the database with a shared data set. And when marketing changes the logo on you, because they will, you go into that one shared data set, you point it to the new logo in the new table or the new record in the same table, and your entire environment gets upgraded with the new logo, if you do it right. So data set, both embedded and SharePoint uses for procedure. I just made that point. Drag, this is your palette. You get a palette. You get to define the page. Is it horizontal, portrait, landscape? What size? 8.5? Is it legal? You get to just choose. You don't get that in Power BI and other analytical tools. This is your tool for paginated reports. I cover this, create a shared data set. You can set the default parameters. I make it, again, really easy on my users. I told you I give them a parameter for the period. I default it to last week because that's what they run 90% of the time. So you set the default. You can recognize that T-SQL. 7 days ago. We'll give you a day out of last week, and that's what sets the default. There it is. Drag the object that you're using, whether it's a chart or a graph or a grid, onto the page, and hit preview. So I just had, this data set is querying the user, the transaction table of who's won what reports. I'm not querying our data warehouse. I'm simply querying the report server database to see which reports are getting used, who's using them, and when they ran them. I did all that for this demo. Right-click on the report, deploy it, and it shows up in your SSRS, your website, Report Manager. I publish all of my reports to one folder called Masters, and then my users see a tree of folders called Visible, and then I use linked reports exclusively because I can have better control over the security and the default parameters that I can set that way. And it's a little involved for what we're covering here, but I can go over some of that. I'm going to keep it moving. And questions? Too fast? Anyone asleep? Nudge them. Help me out. I talked earlier, you can schedule the report to run. You pick a schedule. The delivery mechanism, you can schedule the report to write it to the file system. You can schedule it. This is Web Archive. I could pick PDF, and I could pick file system, and at 8 a.m. every day, it would go deposit a PDF onto the file system, if you want to do that. Cannot do that in SharePoint integrated mode. You can only schedule it to go to a SharePoint document library, not to the file system. You can schedule it to email out in a variety of rendering formats. HTML, web, PDF. I always include a link to the report, and in my report, I might have more on that coming up. In my report, I say, here's the report, here's the 10 a.m. sales report. Click on this link to get the most current data. Because again, I want you going to the portal and getting the data, particularly because more and more of my reports have drill through. 10 o'clock sales report is okay. Sales were whatever they were. What they want to know is if it's not what they were hoping for or expecting, well, how come? And they want to drill into their area and go, was I down across all my stores, or was it one store that tanked? And you don't get that in a report that's emailed to you. All the more reason to go to the portal and use it interactively. All right, this is just more details on the delivery mechanism. So you can pick when to go, a shared schedule. From a DBA admin point of view, when you pick these schedules, they show up in the SQL Server agent job with a crazy GUID. And your DBA may come back and go, what? Do not rename them. They will break. You cannot rename them. I have gone into the description of each of those and said, this is the 10 a.m. report that goes to these individuals. This is the 8 a.m. report that refreshes the data set. All of that, so that I know. Do not try and do that. It will absolutely break. Okay. I have been through multiple companies and multiple SSRS implementations, upgrades, conversions, and every time it changes a little bit. Find your voice. Come up with the look and feel that you want for your reports. The header, the fonts, the colors. Make a template. Use it. And come up with a consistent look and feel for a professional environment that looks like a nice third-party application and not a homegrown, cobbled-together, over the years scenario that I have. Take your pick. When you do migrations, consider upgrading, touching the reports and modifying them to have the most current look and feel that you're using currently. But if you can get out in front of that, make a template. It will also save you boatloads of time in development. I talked about the drill through. Be careful with your naming convention. You should have a naming convention for your T-SQL objects, your tables, your stored procedures, your views. Come up with something that makes sense for your RDLs. You will have dozens and dozens. Figure out what works. What's the first part of the name? Is it the report type, sales, labor, food cost, or is it the date piece? But whatever it is, just like in your other T-SQL code, come up with a convention, agree on it with your peers, or mandate it and shove it down their throats. Depends on your role, but stick with it. I talked about utilizing shared data sets. I think I have a better example on that. And this is a whole database design thing that I don't think we're going to cover or have time for. And then again, you can cache your long-running data sets. If you have these reports that take too long, I have significant performance problems that the boss will not allow me to address that this works great for. I can cache certain reports. That dashboard I showed you on SharePoint, that gauge, it was completely interactive. I missed that. You click on it, it defaults to yesterday. You click on it, you get week to date. Click it again, you get last 4 weeks. And I wanted it to be boom, 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 boom on the user desktop. But rather than make a round-trip call to the database every time, I cached 4 versions of that report with 4 different time slices and rigged the drill-through action on it to just rotate through those so that you get a really interactive experience with no query lag delay. All right, so I have about 20 minutes. I wanted to include some 2016 features. I wrote a whole presentation that I hope to present at Summit this year on 2016 and a smart migration strategy. So ideally, you would not do an inline upgrade of your SSRS environment, and you would prop up a new 2016 server and migrate your reports to it. And I have a whole bunch of tips and tricks on that. So I took some of those slides to show you some of the great stuff in 2016. All this other stuff still applies. This is some of the new features I mentioned in the beginning. We finally got some love with 2016. I talked about their strategy with reporting services, KPIs, mobile reports, and paginated reports, separate from the Power BI piece of the Microsoft stack. We got a new report manager interface. Paul Turley corrected me. It's not called report manager anymore. Anyone know what it's called? The new name that Microsoft, you know how they love to rename things. And we got some really good improvements we've been bitching about for a decade on the ability to control the parameters and how they're displayed. So this is what the new report manager interface looks like. It's really the same functionality. It's still the same website. It's just got the new, more modern look and feel that you're seeing in Office today, in the Office suite. And that you're seeing where it's a lot less, it's a lot cleaner, simpler lines, toned down look and feel. Right here, you can see they added KPIs. So I can have a folder, a KPI, and then an actual report. So that I may not need to run my daily sales report if the reason I'm running it is to see what the unit average volume was. So the average unit did 45.58 in sales yesterday. And maybe that's all I'm running this report for. So now you can actually see in a little KPI, and now I'm not even going to go run this report. But maybe if this was lower than what I was expecting it to be, I could go run this and see it. You can see Microsoft's strategy in the stack right here when you hit New. I can pick a new report, a new mobile report, which launches in its own designer. I mentioned how report the designer is a Visual Studio plugin, and then there was Report Builder, which is its own application. Power BI Desktop is its own application, and the mobile report designer is its own application. All right, so I talked about this. Folders and some KPIs. And if you click on a new mobile report, you can have, again, a variety of different looks and feels right there in Report Manager. Without having to actually run a report, you can get some great stuff right there. The data sets look a little different. Fortunately, they changed the icon, so it's kind of clear that that's a data set. Data source. And then the data sets look like an array. So it makes a little more sense just at a glance what I'm looking at here without having to pay attention, because in the old design Report Manager, it looked quite a bit different. And then, again, the parameter control. So you saw earlier you got 2 columns. Now you can spread it out into as many columns as you want and lay them out differently. They really fixed some of that. They also really missed the mark on a couple of things. And I'm going to gloss over some of this because it doesn't really apply here for you with your interests. But now I can move some parameters over here. So I told you this report had this huge collection of 8 or 9 for group 1 and 8 or 9 parameters for group 2, and then you couldn't see the screen. It took up half the screen, particularly on today's widescreen monitors. So now I can move them over there, and I can keep moving them. So there I moved a couple over, but when I tried to run it, if you've used reporting services, you've seen this error. It basically says one parameter is dependent on another, because you can do cascading report parameters. And it's going, this is cascading, and you don't have the dependencies in the right order. So even though I had them in the right order, it looked like it didn't like this gap. So I messed around with it and moved it around. And I go, okay, I got rid of the gap. We're good. And, okay, that looks pretty good, but it still doesn't like the gaps. So I finally rearranged it all, got them in the right cascading order, and now I'm using half the screen because I'm twice as wide to display those. So here's what it looks like when you deploy it to the report server and view it in a browser. You get this. Much improved. And this still says view report. I heard someone this morning say that you could change the text on that. Is that person in here? I heard that you could change the text on that, which I thought was really cool. I'm going to look into that instead of view report. Run report makes more sense. However, be careful on your browser layout. If you resize your browser in a little bit, you may get something jacked up like this. It's wrapping the text, and it just didn't lay out on the screen very well. So that dynamic nature of HTML5 that we're all leveraging just didn't quite pull it off on this one. So KPIs are really cool. You saw them in a few screenshots ago. Really cool little icon dashboard with information. Super easy to configure. You write a little query, stored procedure. You pick what you want. I want a little KPI. It's going to be this value. You can compare it to either a static value. So maybe your target sales is $5,000 a day. And you can compare it to that and make it up or down and change it. Change the coloring, change the icon. Or maybe you can also make it dynamic. I want to see that you're red or green compared to last year, last week. So you can actually set either a hard field, hard-coded, or dynamic. So here I just wrote a quick little thing that queried, that returned the date and a value. That's all I had to write. And I was able to plug it in here. Here's my data set. Which value do I want? I'm not setting a status to compare it to this time. And I get a little chart. I think that I had never seen this before. I dug in, and 20 minutes later, I had that. So it's pretty straightforward. Nice. So I talked about their strategy, and then with mobile reports. If you come here and you pick mobile report, it will actually look on your workstation to launch the mobile report tool. And if you have it, it'll launch it. If you don't have it, it will give you this great link to go download it. Instead of having to find it on the Microsoft site where the download is. It takes you there. It's really nice. Big bonus. You pick your language, and if you do have it on your desktop, you'll see it here. So, what? So then you get your same palette of items. You can have some time navigators and selectors, some gauges. The amount of objects is extensive. I think there's a whole other slide of all these little objects you can use for mobile report builder. Years ago, Microsoft acquired a company called DataZen, which had an amazing mobile product, and they've folded it into the Microsoft stack now, and this is what we're seeing from it. So there's an entire collection of different mobile graphical dashboard analytic tools you can use. You're not going to do a grid on a 4-inch screen. You're going to do KPIs. You're going to do indicators. You're not going to return your traditional wall of numbers. So you go, you hook it up to your data set. I said, I want this indicator. I'm going to hook it up to this data set. I'm going to pick one particular value from that data set. You can go into the settings and change all different things from currency and date ranges, and it shows up in your collection. And then you have your choice. Save it to the file system, publish it. And you can publish it to SSRS, and now it's there, and it shows up on SSRS, and users can navigate to that site on their phone as long as you've done the correct plumbing through the firewall to get to your report server, which is another reason why Microsoft's Power BI strategy, because that's in the cloud. So your phone users, there is no firewall, right? They've just got to get to that and authenticate to that site. If your users are going to do this on a 4-inch screen, you got to consider that plumbing to get on domain to make that happen. Okay, I did go fast. I have 10 minutes, and I can cover some more stuff right away, but I do want to take a pause and cover some questions. Please. This isn't about me, it's you, your questions. Yes, sir? The question was, the user has SQL Server 2005 running on XP. And you're running SQL Server on XP. Yes, reporting services was made available with the release of Service Pack 2 to SQL Server 2000. So in 2005, it got some love. It was an improvement. If you were using SQL Server in the previous century, when 2000 came out is when Microsoft released the concept of software assurance. And we didn't get a release between 2000 and 2005, and those customers who had bought software assurance maintenance were pissed. Where's my new version of SQL? With SP2 of 2000, they threw us a bone, and it included SSRS as a new feature. So yes, SSRS is available in 2005. It looks slightly different. Other than the brand new stuff I just showed, all that other stuff is there, including data-driven descriptions, which you wouldn't be able to run on XP anyways. But yes, it's there. It's part of your licensing. It's a separate download. You'll have to find the bits to do the download if you don't have your media. And then the designer tool, you will want to pick the correct designer tool. The new designer tool, SSDT, I use Visual Studio 2016, 17, I don't know, whatever the new one is. And it has a feature where I can right-click deploy, and it will interrogate and see what the version is of the target report server and deliver it accordingly. Down to 12, R2, maybe 08, not 05. I will tell you that. So you will need to go find BIDS, Business Intelligence Design Studio install bits, and you'll have to do your development in that. There were some significant changes between 05 and 08 where they changed the schema of the RDL, because I've had to hack the RDL and reverse engineer them. But you can do that, yes. Yes? So the question is, can I use 2016 features if I'm running 2012? So it doesn't matter where the data is. It can query data from all over the place, including flat files. The new features of 2016 are part of the 2016 SQL Server installation. So you would need 2016 installed, even if it was just for SSRS, you would need that. But it could look at data from anywhere, including SAP. Right. But you would need to license that server, that 2016 server, accordingly. Yes? You write the stored procedures, right? But what about the tables and the data? Right? So it's a little tricky to join two. So you would have two stored procedures, which would be two data sets. And with the new version, you can link the two data sets. Actually, not even 2016, even in 08 and R2, you can link two data sets together. So you can display order header, order details in one report. And it might, under the hood, call one stored procedure or two. The stored procedure returns whatever you put in the result set. Most of mine query dozens of tables. You don't. So all the report has in a data set is the results of the stored procedure. So you write a stored procedure, and for example, it might report orders, order amount, date. And that's in your result set, and your data set, that gives you essentially an array in reporting services. And you do what you want on the page with the results of that stored procedure. Yes? I don't. But you can go to some of the other SQL Saturdays. My blog, I haven't been doing. I try, it's just not for me. But go to SQL Saturday Orange County. Go to Pass, where you signed up for this, and go look in Find an Event, and go to Past Events, and look at Orange County in the past, San Diego, Oregon, and you'll find my presentations, and many of them have my presentations posted there. And I'll upload this one too tomorrow. I'll upload this one to this event's website. But look at some of the other event websites, or go to my blog and it has all the events I've spoken at, and you can find them and go to those event pages to find the downloads. Yes? Yes. It's very easy, and I've done this in several different third-party applications. So the question was, can I use a report in another application? It's a URL. The report is a URL. So in your app, you can do your own parameter collection, and you can build your own URL, complete with rendering extension, whether it's to HTML or to PDF or to Excel, and then you can render it within your page on your site, or you can pop a dialog box that says download. Yes, very, very easy to do. I've done it. Was there another question?
Yeah, I have our organization was much more critical to SSRS, and we're turning out PDF about 5 hours of support for the huge amount of data. I just wanted to use the validate the output. Is there a way that it's both export PDF and text or something without reports so that you can see that?
So the question was, how can I validate the report, the output? Because you mass produce a whole bunch of PDFs. Personally, what I would do is so the report has a stored procedure that's calling a data set, calling and retrieving data. I would go get that data from the results of that stored procedure, put it into a table, and do my comparison completely on the T-SQL side. But where's it pushing it from? I don't know. I hadn't attacked anything like that. Please fill out the evals. I genuinely read them at all the SQL centers I go to. I learn from it. I can improve what I do. We only get better by knowing what we're not better at. So these are hang on my cube. This one is really for my boss because he won't let us, oh, we don't have time for that. Just get it done. Rather than, I say, hey, I'd like to do it the right way. No, just get it done. This has been on my cube for more than 15 years. You can't quite see it. I took a picture of it, but can you see this bridge is overlapping? Yeah. If you got it almost right, it's still wrong. So, I'm at my time. I'm happy to stick around until the next presenter kicks me off. And I know him, so I'll kick him in the shins. So I'm not going to stop answering questions, but if you've got some, fire away. And then please, here's these boxes. Please grab one for the organizers, for me, the didn't like. There's a... up, down, and stick them in the envelope. Here, I'll start off. One of each. I'm not biased. Great. Thank you. Yeah, any other questions? That is a largemouth bass. The #1 sport fishing fish in the world. Any source. So there's just a... I'll go to the beginning. I had it